These are principles that I've come across just in my own reading, writing, reflecting, and occasional learning. But I think that whatever your particular approach to personal learning is, it's going to be similar to this. And if it's similar enough that you can follow the same sort of methodology that I'm following, even if your results are slightly different. So personal learning basically boils down to three major principles. These are what I would call principles of effective personal learning. I don't know if it's better like this or like this. Like this or like this. Or at 12:30 in the morning, I'm very easily distracted. Interaction, usability, and relevance. Interaction. We have lots of people talk to us about interaction and the need for interaction and all of that. But what does interaction actually boil down to? What constitutes good interaction versus bad interaction? Well, in my mind, they are going to slow down, don't worry. There's a few principles of interaction that I think are important. Pull, for example, is better than push. By pull, what I mean is that you select the content that you want to view. You find the content that you want to view. You pick the people that are going to talk to you. It's the difference between choosing which website you want to see, say, and receiving spam in your email. Pulling websites in and choosing them allows you to select content that you want, whereas if content is pushed at you like spam, well, you get mostly stuff you don't want. Interaction, people say, and I agree, should be in a genuine voice. It should be you reflecting your own knowledge, experience, and opinions. And I think the most important thing about interaction, certainly in my experience, is that it needs to be a habit. It needs to be something that you do on a regular basis. One of the things that I do is my newsletter. And my newsletter is a major form of interaction for me because it's me bringing stuff in. It's reading all these different blogs and things like that, email messages and whatever that's out there on the internet. And it's also me sending my ideas and my opinions and even a little bit of knowledge. But the important thing and what makes the newsletter work is that I do it on a regular basis. It's the sort of thing I do every weekday. Pretty much every weekday, and it's a habit. It's like, I eat breakfast, I pet the cat, I do the newsletter. It's just a regular part of my life. And it's creating that flow, that process is what makes the interaction actually work. The second of the principles is usability. And in thinking about this, reading a great deal of Jacob Nielsen, and other people, in my mind, usability boils down to consistency plus simplicity. Now, I know there's more to usability than that, and we can probably become more detailed. But if you wanted to narrow it down to some simple principles that you can work on and use as a way of looking at software, looking at design, then consistency and simplicity work really well. And if you look at the websites out there that are the most usable, or what's the most usable of all? Probably Google, right? Google is very consistent. It hasn't changed practically since the day it was born, and it's very simple. Google, there's a search form, you type in the search form, you're done. That's, in my mind, the ultimate of usability. The third principle is relevance. And relevance is, sorry, I've got markers here. Okay. Great. Got markers flying all over the room. I've got paper under my chair. Never mind. I need some coffee. Next time we do this, you guys get up. Relevance has to do with need, it has to do with value. a lot of people think of relevance in terms of content. Relevance, to a large degree, has very little to do with content. I tell people to watch the flow as opposed to the content. The idea here is that it's not about remembering things. Again, we go back to the original principle. Rather, it's about getting exposed to things that you need. And you know, I think about darts a lot, maybe more than I should. But it's always struck me as interesting that in a nation where they really value technology and industry and commerce, that in the pubs of every pub, of every little town, is this counting game. And people go and they spend their whole night drinking beer and counting and adding and multiplying. And it just is somebody way back when was either very brilliant or very lucky in their life. Anyhow, it's the repeated exposure. It's the function, the need. It's, how did I want to put it? Relevance is defined by function as opposed to topic or category. Relevance is about what you are attempting to do rather than what you're thinking about or talking about. Relevance has to do with need. If something is relevant if you need it, if you don't need it, it's not as relevant. I guess that's almost a tautology, isn't it? Now, I've skipped through those principles very quickly, but that's because I don't have a long time for this. But I'm going to move on now to the other side of the house. That's a very quick look at personal learning. Now I want to talk about network learning. So personal learning, these are the sorts of habits that I've found or that I think that are useful and helpful in understanding how to set up one's personal learning. But now, if you're trying to teach a network to learn things, now this is almost a computational process. It's the sort of thing that people like Minsky and Papert and Rumelhart and McClellan and others have done computationally with connectionist computer systems and the like. As well, teaching networks how to learn is the sort of thing that people who study neural networks, like, for example, the brain study. Network learning is essentially associationist learning. What that means is that, how do I want to put that? I have the little chart here, but that won't help unless I have the nice description. Associationist learning is like, I hate doing a talk at 1 in the morning. Associationist learning is essentially the formation of connections between entities where these connections are created by association of one or another phenomenon. So you have one phenomenon that's presented, another phenomenon that's presented, and the interaction of those phenomena on a network create connections in that network. So the creation of a connection in a network is the creation of an association. How is that? It'll have to do. There's 3 major types of associationism. There's Hebbian associationism, backpropagation, and Boltzmann mechanisms. Hang on a second. Sorry, I've accumulated a debris field behind me. Hebbian associationism is sometimes known as simple associationism, and it is very simple. It works like this. You have one entity and another entity, right? If they both fire at once, then a connection is drawn between them. And if they both don't fire at once, the connection is drawn. But if one fires, and the other one doesn't, that connection is weakened. So simple associationism is same things are connected. Imitation, basic imitation. Backpropagation is a bit trickier. Backpropagation is, now you have a neuron, an entity in a network, you have another entity in a network, and pretend you have a whole bunch of them. See, I'm trying to use a visual element here, right? You have a whole bunch of them, so you have connections that get formed, and then you send in a signal. I don't have enough hands. You send in a signal, and it goes through the connection, and then it comes out the other end, and then you have something at the other end that sends feedback. If it's the right sort of thing that should have happened, it doesn't do anything. But if it's the wrong sort of thing, it sends feedback, no, don't do that. It's sort of like slapping your brain on the wrist. That's a lousy analogy. But the idea here is that you're training your network by giving it feedback. You're sending in signals back the opposite direction from the original input to adjust the connections. The third type is Boltzmann Boltzmann associationism. That's even trickier, but basically, you have your network, your connections all form, and what they try to do is settle into the most stable configuration, because the connections between neurons are not simple, well, they're mechanical connections, but they're also electrical connections, and the connections have different strengths and different weights. And these neurons are firing and stopping and firing. And as they fire back and forth, the connections are shifting and shifting and shifting. And eventually, like a puddle of water, it settles. But the thing is, it might not settle into the best configuration possible. It's kind of like a lake up on a mountain, right? It's settled, but it could go further down, right? If it was just moved around a bit. And so that's what happens. You sort of shake the brain up a little bit, and it's like unsettling your configuration, and then it settles to a more stable configuration. You shake it, and anyhow, how was that? The whole idea here is that basically these are mechanisms of creating connections with neurons and between neurons. And in some cases, there's external phenomena that creates the connections. In other cases, a previously existing state or a corrected state will influence the connections. And in other cases, just simply the nature of the network itself, what counts as a stable state, will influence the connections. I have explained that better. But where that leads us to, if you look at those models, if you look at associationist learning, is a picture of learning that basically looks like this. And in slogan form, it is to teach is to model and to demonstrate, and to learn is to practice and reflect. In other words, in teaching, what you're trying to do is to create an environment where people can have certain kinds of experiences. And then in learning, what you're trying to do is to have those experiences, and then, and this is the Boltzmann aspect of it, to reflect on them, to think about them, to make sense of them, if you will. So, on the one hand, we have personal learning, and on the other hand, we have network learning, and these are, as I said earlier in the talk, two sides of the same phenomenon. I'm describing the same thing when I describe network learning and personal learning. And when I describe network learning and personal learning, people always say, just like they say about the internet, well, how do you know it's reliable? How do you know if you're not getting some voice of authority, or if you're not getting, I don't know, peer review or whatever, if you're going to be learning the right thing, what you know will be true. And on the one hand, there's no guarantee, just like there's no guarantee in anything, sorry about that. But on the other hand, there are ways we can set up networks in such a way that networks can be known to be reliable. And this is what I call the semantic condition of a network. This is the last of the slides, by the way. I know you're going to miss things. This is the semantic condition, the diversity, autonomy, openness, and connectivity. Now, what do I mean by those? Well, by diversity, what I mean is that the process, if you will, has the widest possible spectrum of point of view. You have the widest possible number or types of inputs. The neurons or the entities that are in your network are as diverse as possible. If we're talking about conversation or interaction, the members of the conversation are from different backgrounds. They have different assumptions, different worldviews, approach matters from different perspectives. Autonomy is where the members of the network or the entities in the network are each acting of their own accord. It's where like when networks are forming connections with other networks, for example, where these connections are each being formed independently. Or if a person is an entity in a network, we think of in a group or a decision-making process, each person is making their decision on their own. And rather than, say, acting by the orders or at the behest of some external authority or control or causal agent or something like that. The idea is that in a network, each entity in the network is independent and autonomous, making their own decisions. If you think about, if you've ever read Marvin Minsky's Society of Mind, this captures that really nicely. In the Society of Mind, Minsky talks about individual agents, and the whole idea in a society of mind is that each agent does their own thing, and their own thing might be really simple, like move the thing from here to here or whatever. And the mind is formed from all of these independent, autonomous agents, each trying to do their own thing. Openness is the principle that the network is, like entities in the network can freely send signals to other entities in the network, and that, of course, is how connections are formed, and can freely receive signals. So, in other words, there's a free flow of information in the network, that there isn't a blockage of the sending of signals back and forth in the network. You can imagine what would happen in your own brain if one neuron was not able to send a signal to another neuron. Your brain would essentially cease to function. And then, of course, the final principle is connectivity. Can the networks be connected, or can the entities in the network be connected? And can they form patterns of connectivity? Okay. Now you might be wondering, okay, I've given you this, I'm giving you that, I'm giving you that, I'm giving you, the picture of learning, personal learning, associative learning, the semantic condition. How does this all cash out? Well, if we think about the different sorts of things that we can create in order to, foster learning, if you will, we can think of those things in terms of the model that I've just given you. Let's take the basic framework. The basic framework now of modeling and demonstrating, practice and reflection. Now think about the sorts of things that you can use to model. And I have a nice slide here which you can't see, but think about the types of technologies you could use to model. So like say wikis or concept maps or things that you can use to model. Glyphy is a neat little modeling program that's online. Or frameworks or reference frameworks like Wikipedia or even documentation of something like an XML specification. Other types of representations, video representations, 3D representations like say virtual worlds or things like that. So, okay. I'm not done. All right, so you think, okay, what about a wiki? All right, so let's think about a wiki, okay? And so we think about a wiki first in terms of associative learning. All right, now does the wiki provide examples to follow? Well, that's one way to use a wiki. Another way to use a wiki, if we're thinking of back propagation, is a way to enable corrections and criticism. And then the third type of association is the Boltzmann mechanism, the shaking up and settling in, is a lot like rethinking and rewriting. And so what this does is this informs us of the purpose of a wiki, how the wiki is created, but it also tells us how to use the wiki. People sometimes think of a wiki as a publishing tool, but it's not a publishing tool, it's not the content that's important. Rather, it's a place to create examples, it's a place to create this correction, this back propagation, this feedback. It's a place to try something and rework it, and rework it, and rework it. Now we think about the personal learning part. I'm writing pretty well backwards, aren't I? I don't know if you can read it, but I can write it. Okay. Personal learning, interaction. And I think that's very interesting. If you think about Wikipedia, Wikipedia had the wiki pages themselves, but what they discovered is that they needed to create discussions of those pages. They needed to add that interactive element in order to resolve some of the differences of opinions that would occur regarding the precise wording of a page. Genuine voice is a wiki, a case where you get genuine voice. So I think one of the big questions about Wikipedia is whether the so-called neutral point of view or objective point of view is something that can be sustained over time. It's one of the big areas of dispute. And we see that it's an area of dispute because we want genuine voice. That's really not much of a note, but it'll have to do because it's too hard to write. This is actually pretty heavy. You wouldn't believe it to look at it. Also, usability. Is the wiki usable? Is it a simple and consistent interface? Well, yes it is. This is in fact one of the big attractive things about a wiki. A wiki is a very simple interface. You have the wiki notation that you use to create the pages, and it's a consistent interface. It's the same notation from one wiki page or from one wiki to another to another. This is one of the big advantages. And I've always wondered, there's a wiki out there, a wiki site called JotSpot out there, and what they did is instead of using the standard wiki interface, they used one of those MS Word type interfaces where you push the little button for bold or italic or whatever. And I'm not sure that that was an improvement because although it exchanges one kind of consistency for another kind of consistency, it sacrifices simplicity in favor of a more complex interface. You can do more, but now it's not as simple anymore. So this is one of the sorts of questions that you ask when somebody introduces something like JotSpot. Another thing now, is the content of a wiki relevant? Is it accessible? Is it available where and when I need it? Well, in some cases, yes. Although one of the things that I've encountered in the use of the wiki, we see things like corporate wikis or university wikis or things like that. And what characterizes them typically is that they're locked behind passwords. So you have to log in just to see them. And in the case of the wiki that we have here at NRC, you can't even access it unless you're in the NRC network. So for me, it's not accessible at all at home. That, according to these criteria, and in my own experience, makes the wiki a lot less useful. The wiki in order to be useful, needs to be accessible. I need to be able to get at the content when I need it, where I need it. On the other hand, Wikipedia, which is open, is generally accessible. And now the question is, can I make that content available in other places? One of the things I've done on my own website is to try to take Wikipedia content and put it right on the pages of my own site. I can do that, so that's a good thing about Wikipedia. And then finally, we ask questions about the reliability of the information of Wikipedia, or of wikis in general. So this would be the semantic condition. Wow, my writing gets worse the lower I go on the page. Okay, so, first of all, do I have diversity? I'm not going to go much beyond that. Well, diversity in the world of wikis, what this tells us is that there's going to be a minimum threshold number of people required to make a wiki work well. A wiki with a small number of people is going to perform differently than a wiki with many people, because a wiki with a small number of people is going to be less diverse. There's going to be less points of view, fewer points of view. And in my mind, there's a very large difference between the reliability of a wiki like Wikipedia that's created by hundreds of thousands of people and the reliability of a wiki that's created by 10 or 15 people, maybe in your local company or your local school or whatever. People sometimes ask, well, how can you trust the information in a wiki? This is one of the things that you look at. How many people were involved in the creation of the content? How diverse were these people? Another element now is autonomy. Were the contributors to the wiki autonomous? Were they able to contribute their own perspective, their own point of view? In Wikipedia Manifeste, they can contribute their own point of view. Although in a corporate wiki, we might ask whether people are able to freely contribute their own point of view, or whether they feel constrained by, if you will, a corporate line or something like that. So this is the sort of question that you ask when you're setting up the design for something like this. If you need your wiki to be reliable, then you're going to need some mechanism to ensure that the people can freely contribute to that wiki. And then the connectedness. How well can you connect elements of the wiki to other elements of the wiki, and also how well can you connect elements of the wiki to external things? In Wikipedia, for example, one of the strengths of Wikipedia, and this is the way I use it a lot, is I go to a page in Wikipedia, and I don't cite the page, but Wikipedia has connections to all kinds of primary sources, resources, personal web pages, all kinds of stuff. So Wikipedia is not simply a place where I have information, but it's a starting point to a whole network of related information. And then finally, the openness. Can anybody contribute? Can anybody read or access the information? And again, this is the idea that something that is accessible is going to be more useful. That was a really bad way of phrasing it, but anyhow, how do I want to put it? Again, the wiki will be more reliable if people can openly contribute to it, if people can read it. One of the things that I sometimes say, perhaps a little bit cynically, is the reason some of these online publications lock themselves behind subscription walls isn't so much to raise the money, it's just that they don't want to be widely viewable across the internet, because they would be much more roundly criticized were they just openly viewable, rather than viewable only to people who've already subscribed and paid their fees. I'm very cynical that way. Okay, so that's an example of the process. I can do that same sort of thing for the other types of things. For example, take demonstrations. Teachings, modeling, and it's demonstrating. Think of the sorts of things that we can use in order to demonstrate things. Well, one way we can demonstrate things is to use images. So we think about, say, image samples or image libraries. And do image libraries support these things? Well, image libraries they do offer examples, that's very clearly the case. But do they offer correction? Or are we thinking, well, not if they're just simple static image libraries. You're going to need to introduce some additional features to an image library in order to allow for feedback and comments. Like you might need little comment fields, say, underneath the images. And you need some way of allowing reuse of the images. You need to be able to download the images. You need licensing that will support that. Images, will they support personal learning? Will they support interaction? Well, the images themselves won't, but the image library could. If there was, for example, personal image libraries to allow people a genuine voice in comment areas, so that people can not just put the images up there, but their experiences related to the images and their opinions. They're putting up personal photos. By now, it's probably dawned that I'm not talking about just an image library, am I? I'm talking about something that resembles one of the darlings of the Web 2.0 world, something like Flickr, right? Where it's not just an image library, but it's some kind of online community. Images, does it have a simple and consistent interface? Flickr does have a simple and consistent interface. It's one of its major strengths. And are the images accessible when I need them to be? Well, Flickr, after a while, built something called the Flickr API, which means now that I can make my images available not just on the Flickr website, where they're not really that useful, but on my own, well, in my blog, for example. Or I can put them in emails, or I can send them to a printer and make a calendar out of them. In other words, my images are now available where I need them to be. You can even put them in Facebook and that these days. Okay, well, that's pretty good. How reliable is Flickr? And you might think, well, reliable? Flickr? That doesn't make any sense. But again, if we're thinking here of knowledge not as content, but as networks, as connections, it does actually make sense to think about the reliability of an image collection. Well, Flickr is reliable. Flickr is very diverse. It has like thousands and thousands of members. These members work autonomously. They're not creating images for some company or some publisher. They're putting up their own images. They're connected. They create links to the images. Flickr, in fact, did something that very specifically connected images, and this is one of its great strengths, in tagging. Tagging was a way of drawing connections from one image to another image to another image to create sets or collections of images. And then finally, the openness. Anybody can add images to Flickr. Anybody can look at the images in Flickr. So, again, this metric here allows us to look at something, a basic thing like image collections, and then gradually, by looking at the different properties, you begin to shape what it should look like. And lo and behold, what it should look like comes out to be something like Web 2.0. And this is the lesson that I'm trying to draw out here. It's not that here's Web 2.0 and you should use it. Rather, here's what you should do, and Web 2.0 is an example of where we're led by these principles. I'm running out of time, but let's look at Second Life, just for fun. And again, Second Life, does it provide us with examples? Yeah, that's one of its strengths. Does it allow correction and criticism? Well, yeah, okay, yeah, people can communicate back and forth, so I guess sort of, if you can find them, you have to find them first. Rethinking and rewriting. Can you reuse content in Second? Well, no. Actually, they made that illegal. You can't unless you pay them money for it. Okay, well, Second Life. Does it support interaction and a genuine voice? Yes. Again, that's one of its strengths. It's an online community. It's a massively multiplayer online role-playing game. So yeah, it does support interaction. It supports experiences. People can express their opinions. They can create their own personal identity, although one of the problems with Second Life, at least in my view, is that there are limitations on that personal identity. You have to be one of their names. You can't choose your own name. Is it a simple and consistent interface? It's mostly consistent. As to whether it's simple, some people have said that, well, no, it's not that simple. I read an article just today, in fact, that speculated, could we use Second Life to replace a university in the event of a natural disaster? And first blush, oh yeah, it's a neat idea. But then came the criticism, well, it's not like Second Life is simple. It's not like people can just jump onto Second Life and suddenly start using it. They have to go through a training period, which means that everybody in the university will have to have been trained on Second Life before Second Life can be used to replace the university in the event of an emergency. And it's just that sort of thinking. If Second Life were designed differently, where you could just log onto it and just intuitively understand how it works, kind of like life, then it would work a bit better. Then you could use it. So you sort of look at Second Life and you ask, well, you ask yourself, how could it be designed to be simpler to use? Where was it? Okay, simpler. Is Second Life accessible where and when I need it? Well, is there a Second Life API? Can I use Second Life, say, in Facebook? Well, I don't think so, not yet. I certainly can't use it in my blog. There's the Second Life URL, so there's some linking, but it's not nearly as portable as I would like. How reliable is it? How diverse is it? Are there many worlds? No, there's only one world inside of Life, although there's many islands. There's only one world. There's only one company that runs it. That's a concern. Autonomy. How autonomous are the members in Second Life? Well, they're pretty autonomous, but then again, there is the benevolent governance of Linden Labs, which overrides everyone. So that is a question that people ask. Connectedness. Can Second Life be connected to external applications? Well, as I say, a little bit, but it's not clear that there are good Second Life application programming interfaces or ties to other applications. And how open is it? Can anyone contribute? Can anyone view it? Well, this is a point of criticism of Second Life. So, I know I'm hitting, well, it says 1:29 a.m. here. I can only imagine what time it is there. But I've given you a few examples of how you can take the principles that I've just described. And you take those principles, and what they're intended to do, right, is not to define absolutely the world is like this, but rather to give you a particular frame of reference from which to view these applications. Again, the traditional way of viewing these things is to think of them as publishing applications, or content transmission applications, or courseware, right, or things like that. And really, they're not that kind of thing at all. They're personal learning applications. They're network learning applications, which means that the properties of these applications are different. The properties of successful instances of these applications are different than would be the properties of a successful, say, book or movie or magazine or newspaper. So that's essentially the talk that I wanted to give. I hope that my tiredness wasn't too much of an impediment. I really appreciate your interest and your patience with less than clear sometimes explanations. So thank you very much. recorded?
Yes, we did get two people doing an audio recording. We might have missed the title of your session to start with, but I'll certainly be in touch with you afterwards to where we might locate that so that you can access that as well. But excellent idea.
Right.
And I've also realised during this conference that we have need for our organisation to review whether we are modelling and using Web2 tools for our own community, and things like capturing the MP3 of the keynotes would be really good for review later on. So, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Any questions? Okay, one last